Ojas, is it okay? I'll go ahead and share my screen.
Yes, can do.
Okay, great. Okay. Somebody just give a shout out if you can see my screen, etc.
Yes, Venkat.
Thanks so much. Okay, all right. Thanks so much, everyone, for joining. And if you can hear me, see my slides, that's great. My name is Venkat, and I'm part of the team at both the archives at NCBS and the Milli Archives Foundation. And Ojas and I are going to be speaking on behalf of many people who've been part of this project over the last couple of years, actually. I also want to sort of just acknowledge that the audience is very, very diverse, not to stress on the word that you see on the screen right now. So we are going to try and work in a way that sort of makes sense to most members of the audience. So if something is too obvious for you, we ask for your indulgence and just wait it through. So our project, Annomilli, which we're super excited to launch today, is an attempt to have digital public annotation of archival catalogues. And very broadly, what we're trying to do here is diversify, describe, and discover how we see things, and at this point, archival things. The work is a collaboration between folks at the archives at NCBS, the Milli Archives Foundation, and TATL. In terms of, there's a whole list of names that you can see on the screen. So just a big shout out to Manas, Atman, Denny, Tarunima, Ojas, of course, who's been the software architect for this work. The design by Anupa, our colleagues at Caltech, Mariela and Tommy, who've been involved in initial conversations. Deviduti Roy, who I think is on the call, as well as Liz Stainforth, who've been involved in the conversations regarding one particular aspect of this project that we will discuss in a moment. And of course, this work cannot be done without the folks who have supported and believed in this. So a big shout out to Arcadia, to the TNQ Foundation, and of course to NCBS, which has been the home for a lot of our work here. So I'll start out with perhaps the thing that we'd like to do first, which is just start out with an everyday archival object or an archival folder. What you're looking at here is one image from a photo album titled The Mysore Sericulture Department in 1925. And predictably, there's an archival ID for it. It's part of the Leslie Coleman papers at the archives at NCBS, and it has a catalog ID, and it's publicly accessible. Anybody should be able to see this. And this particular image is called Grainage Microscopic Examination, and it's part of a larger, the whole album covers the whole process of sericulture from start to finish, and this is somewhere in between, right? So now, the question for us as archivists and as members alike, I think, is, when you look at an image like this, of course, there are various ways in which you can add archival description to the object. And we've done that as archivists. We've added subject terms like sericulture, and we've, of course, added Leslie Coleman as a person who's one of the creators of this particular collection. But more broadly, what we're trying to figure out is what is it that we truly see in an object? And also equally, who sees the stuff that you see in the object? So, when you're trying to enable digital or wider or open access, this question of who is actually describing the archive and who is seeing the archive and what do they see becomes central to this process. And so when what we're trying to do is thinking of the archive as part of the digital commons in ways that we can invite the public to be involved in archival description. This process of trying to describe and trying to annotate is, of course, not new, and we'll talk about this in a moment. But these three ideas of discovery, annotations, and stories are a certain circular space in which we see the archive as being embedded in the arrows between these spaces. And diversifying description is a way to basically say that we want to diversify how we see the archives. We want to annotate a living mesh of archives. Now, discovery tools as such have been around for a long time, and discovery tools, including through existing individual catalogs or through aggregators of different sorts. And I've just listed out a few that came to our minds while we were preparing these slides, have been around for quite a while. So aggregation on its own has been around for quite a while. And so the process of bringing different kinds of archival catalogs to come together in a common platform is an idea that has been explored and actually has been very, very successful in many domains. Now, the second part of this question is annotations. How do we add meaning to the archival object. Now, if I had to go back and look at the same image again, there are a few other ways in which I could sort of perhaps ask myself, what is it that I'm seeing? And I suppose I could say that I'm also seeing labor practices. I'm seeing issues relating to social class, about who gets to do what kind of work. And of course, the word grainage, which we will talk about in a moment, which Ojas, my colleague, pointed out, is not a very commonly used word anymore. But social class and labor are two areas that I imagine that this particular object or this particular folder has relevance for in terms of how we think about the material. So our question is really, how do we annotate any of these things? How do we annotate people, places, subjects, descriptions, or even affective response that we will come across in a moment? So a little more on annotations. For some of you might not be familiar with the word itself. The first annotation, at least as far as we are concerned as the archivists, is in a sense what we as archivists do. We develop a finding aid. We may call it metadata. We may call it a catalog. We may call it a card catalog if you're in the library. But these are the first layers of meaning that we ascribe to a historical object so that it can be found by someone else in the future. A second or a third level of archival annotations are the kinds of notes that you might see in archivist notes in finding aids, in research guides, in collection guides, or as is an amazing example from the King's College goes, archives that are used in education, where there's critical reading in the classroom, and there is a student annotation being done here on the King's College platform. Web annotations on the whole are, of course, not new. Every single social media like or a thumbs up or a heart or a hashtag is a form of an annotation. A comment thread on a query platform is a form of an annotation. So all of these, in a sense, for us are also different words that are trying to capture the same thing, whether we call something linked data or vocabulary or keywords or annotations, they're all different ways of seeing something and defining meaning in those different ways of seeing. This idea of ways of seeing has been there also for a very long time, as I'd mentioned, through the card catalogues or through Ted Nelson's work on hypertexting in his work on literary machines, or Tim Berners-Lee's CERN memo from 1989. And annotations have really come together in the World Wide Web's framework, where they have at least 18 different kinds of annotations that they have identified as part of the World Wide Web protocol. And the way we see it is at this point that since archival description hasn't fully aligned with the World Wide Web's thought process of annotation, we have aligned archival description to go along with the describing annotation that is used in the World Wide Web protocol. Web annotations for historical objects or broadly for research has also been something that has been tested really extremely well. Some of the oldest examples are, of course, things like Hypothesis, which is for collaborative document annotations. There are more recent ones that I'm listing out here, research and social annotations. Omeka has a really nice platform for W3C, the World Wide Web annotation implementations. And there are slightly newer ones. There's a really nice project from NCSU, the North Carolina State University, called Annona. There's another one called Glycerine. All of these, and these, the last few ones that I'm mentioning, are built with a certain IIIF presentation protocol, which I can talk about later if people are interested. But all this to say that there are a variety of web annotation tools that already exist. So annotation as a whole itself is not new. But what is, in our minds, the gap is that a way to actually annotate archival catalogs using archival fields, so existing archival description fields, drawing from standardized vocabulary that you can pull from existing vocabulary sets that exist in the world, allowing the user's data to be encoded as the author in this once it's approved, and for the annotation itself to be re-ingested or brought back to the source archive so that it can be discovered in detail later. So for us, the path to wider discovery, this wider discovery, for us at least at this point, is to say, can we do something which aligns with global standards, shareable catalogs, some sense of interoperability, and encoding ownership at every level, including the user who's actually doing the annotation. So what Annomilli is trying to do really is these four things. That is, first of all, as a user, you can add your way of seeing. You can add subjects, persons, people that you see, identify more detailed description on any given folder. You can choose from existing vocabulary, or if you don't see it, as it might be for a lot of indigenous knowledge, you can add your own ways of seeing to new local knowledge vocabulary, which is exportable. And you can add description at multiple levels. So it doesn't have to be at the specific item or photograph level. It can be at the collection, series, subseries, file, or folder level. And Annomilli itself is trying to ensure that any user annotation, any user ways of seeing are distinct from the archival record. So they coexist. They don't override each other. It tries to allow that the archives can bring back the new annotations. Most importantly, perhaps at this point, it's probably important to flag this, that Annomilli itself does not need digital objects. And we did this in a very deliberate way because we realized that many archives do not have digital objects. And so we have a particular use case where we imagine Annomilli as being a tool that could be used in any research or any home environment where you just have access to the physical material, but you're still annotating the catalog. So your way of seeing is still captured. And what we're trying to basically say is that you build a rich interlinked world of catalog annotations. The way you see things is coexisting with the thing itself. So in terms of the vocabularies that we just mentioned in the previous slide, the prototype vocabularies that we're using are two of the biggest vocabularies that exist, the Library of Congress subject headings and the Library of Congress's name authority file. Now we are fully aware that both of these have come for some criticism over the years because of the nature of who's created these vocabularies. And of course, we do have a Milli local knowledge vocabulary that is exportable. And in the future, we imagine that we can also merge other vocabularies that come into play as part of this. So we've tried to test it out for 3, and we see that it can scale for more if needed. So what else can we do with Annomilli is perhaps slightly a little bit of a provocation that we hope should raise some both surprise and perhaps some serious questioning from the archivists in the room at least, which is archives and archivists tend to try and tell you what is and what exists and what do you see, but rarely do we capture the idea of how do we feel about something, how do we feel about the archival object. And by extension, in these days, we need to ask, how does an AI tool respond about emotion in the archive? So simply said, if you see this is from the same album, and you see the subtitle here is saying drying and sorting of cocoons as part of the sericulture process. And so there are a few tags that you could include into this to say what is it that you see. But if you had to say how you feel about the archival object, you could we've tried to pull together a set of emotional responses. This is largely the work of Debyaduti and Liz who joined the call. Or you could offer a no response to this. The reason we have tried to do this as a particular additional archival field is that even if we are not doing it, the AI tools are doing this anyway. This is an amazing example from the Harvard Art Museum's AI platform, where they have 2 sets of metadata, human-generated data on the top and machine-generated data on the bottom for the same image. And for this image, you see that one of the machine-generated data here, I don't know if you can see it, says the word sad with a fairly high confidence interval, if you will. And so the question of whether this is truly sad, if this is the emotion that someone really has when they see this image, are, I think, reasonable questions for us to ask. And so if the AI tools are bringing apparently human emotion into it, it's reasonable for us to say that we need to bring at least some aspect of affect into the object. And that's something that future archives can choose to bring back to their archive if they want to or not. In terms of tech and admin, the admins can verify the user input. So I just need to stress that this is something that we are very focused on at this point, that this is very much mediated while we test this out. And the exportable files, the exportable XML files will have the user annotations. And this is just for all the folks who are more code inclined. The importable finding aids, we've tested this out for one open source cataloging system called Archive Space. So we've been able to test it out to bring an EAD, which is encoded archival description. We've also tried to test out importing the finding aid, EAD's encoded archival description. So this is one finding, the same finding aid from different sources. So we've done this for the archives at NCBS, and we've done this for the openly accessible catalog from Caltech. We can export the local vocabulary for others to use. And if you really want to, you could also view the annotated finding aid on the web with an open endpoint. So at each step, as you can see, the intent here is for us to be as openly accessible as possible. So with that said, let's now go test this out. Just give me a second while I switch slides. I'm also really hoping I was not just speaking to myself all through this.
Yep, we could hear you.
Thanks. Just a sec. Okay, so I knew that we were looking at that sericulture album. So, but I promise you can try this for anything else. But I'm just trying to stay with the story here, just so you get a sense of what we're trying to do. So if I go to the sericulture, I'm logged in as a user, by the way. So this is my account. I've done a bunch of annotations before, as you can see. So I'm just going back to look for sericulture, and okay. So this is the album in question. And in this album, I'm just going to quickly go to the image so we all have the same reference frame. That's the other thing I wanted to mention, that what we're doing here is we are annotating at the folder level, but we can definitely annotate. In this particular prototype, we are annotating the folder level, but it's fairly easily scalable to work at higher or item levels if needed. So this is the same image that we were looking at a moment ago. So if I wish to annotate at this point, what you can see on the screen right now on the Annomilli's page is that you see the digital object. If it exists, it'll show up as a digital object viewer here. And what you see here are the archival description that has been pulled directly from the source archive. At this point, this is the archives at NCBS. And below that, there's a section for annotations for this file, and you can see that there are no annotations. We've tried to use words that are perhaps more commonly understood by the public at large instead of archival words. And right at the bottom here is a section, if you are a registered user, you can add annotations. So I'm going to try and do this, and I'm going to try, because I remember we were looking for social classes. And if I just do that and I just wait for a couple of moments, what it's doing is it's pulling data directly from pre-ingested vocabulary, and I'm picking social classes as the term that I wish to put in. I'm just going to try putting in labor to see if something comes up, and you will see that I'm using the English or the Indian spelling, and this is an American vocabulary, so let me see if it shows up. So it doesn't show up, so I'm just going to put labor as a local knowledge vocabulary term. Oh, 1 second. Oh, there it shows up. And then I'm just going to type something in just for the sake of proving that, just to say that this is, let's just say, that I'm trying to find a search term that is not relevant to this particular thing. So anybody with anything? Okay, that's probably not such a good idea. A second, I'll come back to this.
How about like a Indian term, like something that absolutely won't be in the vocabulary?
Yeah, I'll just do that in the next round. I'll just do that. Yeah. I'm just going to add a description here just to say that drainage is a word that is commonly used for large-scale production of large-scale production centers of silk. In particular, and we can verify this in a moment. And I know that this image is from 1925 in Mysore, and therefore I know that this is part of the Mysore state, not Mysore as a city if you're from India. So Mysore state, which is Mysore princely state. So 1 second. So I'm just going to look for Mysore to see what options for Mysore exist in this vocabulary. This is pulling from the Library of Congress's proper nouns, the name authority files. So I'm just pulling princely state. And I'm going to call this done for a brief moment. And I'm going to click save. I am just going to go to a different object in the in this, just as a test to check. I just forgot I didn't put in emotions. So I'm just going to look for satellites, because I know there's a bunch of space in this archive. Okay. So this this object input that you're looking at, I know, is from a very interesting project that happened almost half a century ago on using satellites for instructional television across India, which was a collaboration between NASA and the Indian Space Research Organization and the Indian television broadcaster Doordarshan. So I'm just going to take a moment to try and add an annotation to this. You can see that it also already has a space sciences annotation in the subjects, but I'm just going to add, let's say, an emotion of, for me, the emotion that it first evoked in me when I first saw it, which was surprise. And I'm just going to stop here. And I'm going to hand this off to Ojas, who will take on the role of who's the admin for this interface. So Ojas, I'm just going to stop sharing my screen.
Yep, and I'll share mine in a minute. Hi, so you should be able to see two screens, is that correct?
Yeah, we see two screens.
Nice. All right, on the left, you see our ongoing slideshow, and on the right, you will see the demo that I'm going to show. So yes, we're testing out Annomilli, and Venkat has added his annotations. And as admin, I am going to check out the annotations here. So I can see what annotations Venkat has submitted, and I can, okay, it's about the Mysore Sericulture Department. Okay, I can approve these annotations. Description, yep, seems right. This also seems right. And maybe I don't like this one. Maybe this needs more refining, so I'll just delete this one. I don't approve. Sericulture, yes, makes sense. All right. So once I've added these annotations are then like they show up on the Annomilli folder item page, which you can see here. The annotations here. And then these annotations are also part of the search. So the next time we search princely state on Annomilli, we should be able to get, yep. So it shows matched places, organizations, annotations. Great. As admin of Annomilli, you can also you have a couple of more functions. So the way data is ingested into Annomilli, it is through an OAI endpoint. Now this OAI endpoint can be from a catalog aggregator, or it can be from a source archive. Catalog aggregator, because aggregators do the hard work of normalizing the EADs. So Annomilli or your annotations platform here ingests the OAI EADs, and every OAI EAD is ingested in its own separate namespace. So we are using archive space here as an example, which assigns archival objects the ID serially. So it's possible that between two archival spaces there can be a collision. So each archival space has its own namespace within Annomilli. To avoid this, and to do that, we have three functions. You can upload it as an EAD XML. You can choose an XML file. It has to be an OAI EAD XML. To import from an OAI endpoint. So here you can just paste an OAI endpoint. An example here is this, and you paste an OAI endpoint and you can fetch the OAI EAD, and it ingests all the file level data into Annomilli. And you can sync an existing OAI endpoint for collections that are already there in Annomilli. So say a month out, the collections have gone stale, or there are updates from the source archive or the aggregator. So you can put in the same OAI endpoint again and sync the data. And you can export the ingested OAI, ingested subjects, ingested annotations as EAD XMLs, and those are available like so. So you can export the entire Leslie Coleman EAD with the annotations. Yeah. So let me, this is the EAD file. And just zoom in very quickly. And this EAD file should have Venkat's annotations. Yep. Is that zoom level correct, or should I zoom in more?
Yeah, we
I
can
can
see
hear
it.
you.
Yeah. All right. All the annotations that Venkat had added, these annotations would have the source as LCSH. And if it's a local annotation, if it's an annotation that was not in the LCSH and Venkat added one, they would have the source as MLK, Milli Local Knowledge. And since we are working with EAD 2002 here, all the EAD Illuminati present in the audience, please forgive me for this. But the auth file number is a deprecated attribute, but we are using it to establish the control over the annotations that we are exporting. So when we export the annotations, it would have an Annomilli ID, a user ID, and a timestamp when the annotations were made. Yeah. So Venkat showed you one way of access into Annomilli. The another way of access into Annomilli is through the Annomilli button on your catalog. So in this case, we have implemented a custom action button on archive space, which is like so. So if you are on a catalog at a folder level, and this is a catalog that has been ingested into Annomilli, you can click on it and it will take you to the relevant folder. Yeah. Yeah. And another thing is the export. So the export can also be an XML EAD that has been exported from the admin export function, which I showed you earlier, or it can just be the Annomilli.link with, it can also be the OA endpoint of Annomilli. So since the catalog has, and zoom in, yeah. Yep. Yeah. So if this is the OAI EAD at the catalog level, you can replace the domain with .my.link OAI. And this will retrieve the OAI EAD directly from Annomilli, and it will still have the same annotations. Yep. Yeah. And okay, I'll just move on to next slide. So this was the Annomilli demo. We realized that we are, since this is a,
Just sorry
yeah.
to interrupt. Could you just do the export as well, the reingest?
Oh yeah, yes. Sorry, my bad. Yes. Hold on. Yeah. All right, I'm going to use the staff interface of the archive space sandbox to show a reingest. Okay. So in archive space, you can import an existing EAD like so. Create a job. So import data. And start the job. So the EAD exported from Annomilli is a valid EAD 2002 XML, and it will create proper resource record on archive space. Those who are familiar with archive space, also those who are not familiar with archive space, it creates a collection. Yeah. All right. So we can see the so my bad. This is the so we yep. So the one Venkat annotated was Mysore Sericulture Department, and we can see the published ED like so. I think it's not indexed yet. But I can show it here. These are the subjects that Venkat added. So you can see them being added like that. You can also see the scope content node that Venkat added, which is like so. And it will import the Annomilli ID and control that we have exported from Annomilli. Yep. Did I miss anything? Sorry, Venkat.
I think we're good. Yeah. And it's indexed. So anybody can log on to the sandbox of the archive space link that I shared in the chat. So you can go on Annomilli or the public, any other cataloging interface. So you can see the annotations on both Annomilli and in a re-ingested space.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. So we are aware of some limitations of our approach. We are, since this is a prototype, we would be working on this to add more vocabularies and especially to merge local knowledge, which is going to be a local vocabulary as we add into Annomilli. One important thing about our limitations is also EAD 2002 XML. We are aware that there are newer formats, that there are newer standards which are more accommodating, but we would like to bring this up to say that there are not many ways to encode quantifiable data into archival encodings except for say extents. So for example, when you add an emotion annotation, as Venkat showed earlier, those annotations have only high or a low value. We would like to have a full spectrum of values, say 0 to 10, and that would be great. So this is something of a limitations, but we are trying to work with it and work like around it. And going forwards, we would like to be a bit more realistic with our next release. We would want to work with Dublin Core and EAD3, and we are reading the drafts of EAD4 as well as it's being worked upon. And there are other directions we would like to take the prototype to. I'll hand this over to Venkat.
Thanks, Ojas. I'll just share my screen.
Yeah.
So you can hear me, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So the other directions, more from a user and a buy-in perspective for us, are just to have broader workshops and conversations with folks, because just because we build an annotation tool doesn't mean that people are going to come and start using it. So we are now trying to work. I mean, we believe very much in the fact that this is very useful, and we've from the people we've spoken to, there is a lot of buy-in. But we would like to sort of start developing online workshops for people to sort of come and give ideas on what works, what doesn't. We really do feel that there's a very strong use case in researcher room spaces, so spaces that don't have digital objects but will still benefit from user annotations. And of course, classrooms like the work that I had shown to you earlier from King's College. In terms of AI and LLM tools, of course, there is a whole variety of them out there. I'd shown a few examples from the Harvard Art Museum. So there are two ways to think about this. One is, of course, that we do believe that user annotations will and should strengthen AI responses to some degree. And at the same time, we are also actively starting to look at various AI tools and seeing how they can strengthen the whole Annomilli workflow wherever possible. And all of this for us eventually leads to what we'd like to think of as a digital open access network of archives, where there is a good network of how we see things, the annotations, which allows for multiple modes of discovery, interpretation, and use. And so public annotation for us is just something that at least offers newer modes of knowledge, so ways in which the archivists or the archives had not considered before this. This larger digital commons for archival material, going back to that circular slide I had shared earlier, which is just to say that, discovery, which is finding results across repositories, having a catalog of catalogues, speaking very closely to a space of annotations, which is, so this thing that you see in the yellow box is what we have tried to illustrate in a prototype so far right now. And we do believe there's another space, which is narratives, which is part of the circle, which is what do you do with all this meaning making that you have done of adding interpretations to archival objects? What kind of narratives do you derive from these archival objects once the annotations are there? So that's perhaps another future step to see how the world of narratives coexists with the world of discovery tools and annotation tools. The diverse ways of seeing for us finally is diverse description, and diverse description for us is diverse discovery, and then that leads to very different levels of use and meaning. And finally for us, that is this network of stories that we had spoken about a moment earlier. So with that, I'd like to thank all of you for joining. We have good enough of time for questions and conversation. So if you'd like, feel free to just register, log in on Annomilli to try out the tools, point out bugs if you see them. If you're inclined, do check out our code. We'll put the links to all of this in the chat, but all of the links are available on Annomilli's docs page. And again, a quick thank you to Arcadia, the TNQ Foundation and NCBS, and of course to our collaborators in doing the work, Tattle, and the Milli Archives Foundation, and of course, all of the team at the archives at NCBS. So I will stop sharing my screen here in a moment. We'd be very happy to take questions, ways in which this can be interrogated, things that you think didn't work, worked. Or if you've tried it out, we would love for one of you to have tried it out. Martha.
Thank you so much. This was so interesting and really cool to see. I'm, of course, interested in how you're connecting Annomilli to your own finding aids and kind of the exchange of information between the first annotation, as you called it, the finding aid, and the user annotations. I wondered if you chose the option when you're importing to sync metadata from an aggregator or from a finding aid catalog, will it maintain the annotations in Annomilli even if you get a new finding aid, or things have changed in the structure of the finding aid that you're importing into Annomilli? And then likewise, I was wondering if you're interested in the future bringing the annotations from Annomilli back into maybe like diffing them with the original finding aid and bringing them back into your own finding aids, your catalog?
I'll try and answer one part of it, the part that I think I can answer, and I'm going to defer to Ojas if he can to respond, Ojas or Manas to respond to the rest. The annotations on Annomilli are where the annotations happen. If a source archive wishes to import the annotations, they're importing that at a particular point in history. So they're importing them at a particular point when the EAD is that they're bringing the EAD out from that from Annomilli. At that point, if no changes are there, so then you will have a mirror of both these spaces. Actually, you guys can check it out on the sandbox link that I had shared. You can see that the annotations are kept distinct. The annotations from the user are distinct from the archival, the first annotations. They have different sort of labels attached to them. But in the future, if someone goes ahead and edits Annomilli, then that would, that information is not going to go. So we're not thinking of syncing it constantly because we don't know who's going to be importing at what point in time. I don't know if that answered at least one part of your question, Martha.
I think so. Yeah, I guess if your description of the collection we were looking at today, for example, changed and I don't know, the structure of it, you created a new series that replaced the old series, and you tried to sync that information into Annomilli, I guess you're saying that the annotations would be maintained regardless. They're kind of separate, or they would be maintained in parallel.
Yeah, these are parallel worlds, effectively. Yeah, they would be. I mean, once the import happens, they then become two separate entities.
Right. Okay.
And that's a choice that an archive has to make. I mean, they could choose to run a script to keep importing every few months if they want to constantly get user data. I mean, that's a call that they can make. But what Annomilli is trying to offer is a pathway to bring material in and take material out. There was another question that you had asked, Martha, which, Ojas, I don't know, was there something else? Yeah.
Yeah, I can take that one. Sorry, just to jump to the last part of that question was Martha had asked whether we can diff between the Annomilli annotated EAD and the one that we're bringing in. I mean, which is already there in our source archive. That's actually the difficult part with working with EAD, is that you cannot exactly diff and then import in situ on archive space, which I suppose is a very well-known limitation of working with EADs. Like the example that you gave is like, suppose you were to say add a series or change something, the structure of the EAD would change quite significantly, and yeah, we would be in trouble. But then there are formats like DC, which sort of allow you to import metadata in chunks, and which would allow us to annotate in chunks and then export the annotations in chunks. So the source archive can then pick and choose which annotations they would want to integrate as subjects or as descriptions. But yeah, it's a difficult problem to solve. Yeah. I don't know if it answers.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I'll just quickly respond to a couple of questions in the chat about non-digital objects. Shritama, it was maybe just a simple way of saying that we are annotating catalogs, not the digital objects. And so even if one doesn't have the digital object and you have a physical folder sitting in front of you, whether you are at home or in a research reading room, and you just happen to have your laptop where you're taking your research or notes, for instance, you do have this option to add subject headings or descriptions to the catalog. And there's a fairly streamlined way now for that description or that annotation to be added to the catalog if the admin approves it. So you're still seeing the object physically, it's just that the archive doesn't have digital objects. I was asking someone recently, and for a vast majority of archives, it's a tiny fraction of the archives that are actually digitized. So that's the context in which I brought that up. I hope that helps. There's a hand up from Prithviraj.
Hello, sir. This is Prithviraj Thakur from Khamgaon, Maharashtra. I don't have any question as such. I just want to say that this is a wonderful initiative. Though I missed the first 7 or 8 minutes, I just want to inform the wider community here that we, about 7 or 8 colleagues from different parts of India, are trying to build an annotated bibliography of the historical sources related to the history of English language education in colonial India. And we are trying to establish this as a discipline, and we have built so far we have built an archive of about 700 objects with annotations. So this is really a great tool that we have come to know about. And as I was listening to you, I was wondering how we can work together with you and cooperate closely with you to enrich what Annomilli is doing, and of course, draw from what you have already done and are doing. So as our thoughts take shape, we will get in touch with you. And this was just to appreciate you and also to inform the wider audience present here of the work that we are doing. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much. We'll drop our emails in the chat. We'd love to get in touch at some point. Thank you. There's another couple of questions, I think. Let me see. I think Ojas already answered that one, right? Okay, that was from Kalen. Yeah. Anybody else? Any other questions? Frankly, we were expecting far more pushback about the emotion annotations than we have received. So I'm pleasantly surprised. All right, if there are no more questions, I am just going to be hanging around here, but we would be, we'd be happy to answer any other comments or questions that people have. But if you haven't, we do encourage you to try it out. And if you have any other suggestions of directions in which we could take this forward, if you would like to collaborate, this audience has many different kinds of people. There are archivists, there are software developers, there are historians, there are members of the general public. There are, so many different kinds of you in this audience. So we would just love for you to get in touch with us and see how we can make this work. We do want this to scale and make it work for as many archives as possible. So yeah, love to hear from you on that front as well. I'll just add a couple of emails in the chat in a moment. Leona.
Hi, thanks for that. That was super interesting and a great initiative. Just because you mentioned about the affective annotations, am I right in thinking? And there was a lot of chat about that in the chat. One of the questions was, is it emotions felt on regarding the item, or is it emotions that were, say, to be seen in the photographs and so on? But am I right in thinking that is there currently a range of fixed terms that the person can choose, that the annotator can choose from, or is it more open?
Yeah, both really important questions. I'll hand it off to maybe Dibyaduti or Liz to respond to this if they're in the audience. But the first part, just to say, the intent at this point was only how does one feel about the object. I think that's how it's framed. That's how it's been titled in the description. How do you feel? Not what you see, but this is such a large space that what you see is how you feel as well sometimes. So I don't want to get into that. And Dibiditi or Liz could respond about the terms that are used.
I think thank you, Venkat. Thank you, Cleona, for that question. As Venkat has noted, this is a work in progress. So for the current process, we looked at Library of Congress subject authority headings, and that was mapped onto. We were trying to kind of challenge, say, Paul Ekman's understanding of emotions, which is broken down into six parts, and we tried to look at Indian aesthetic theory of Navarasas, where bhavas and rasas are put into conversation. And when we looked at that vocabulary, that seemed to map onto quite a few of the subject authority headings. But of course, this is a work in progress and will change according to the affective baselines that are being created. And I'm happy to, over an email, kind of put in the larger conversation that has happened and be in conversation. Yeah.
It's such an interesting exercise in and of itself, and yeah, have much fun with it. I wonder as well, immediately for me as an ethnographer, one thing is to name and label or annotate an emotion, and the other is there's so much. I'm immediately curious as to why that image sparked that emotion. So again, with improving annotation in archives, you could go forever adding layers. I appreciate that. You have to stop somewhere, but I wonder, would there be a facility, an open facility for people to explain or interpret or note something on the emotions at some point?
So I'll let Venkat respond. He'll have a far more academic and potentially correct answer. But in terms of, you're absolutely right. If you take any object, that can have a number of reactions, emotions, affects that are generated from it. But one of the things that started off this conversation with Venkat was a project around affect archives and artificial intelligence, right? So how does the archival object get represented in Global North museums, especially through curatorial metadata? And does that metadata really represent what indigenous knowledge systems or even how the viewer in a museum looks at that? And therefore, in a sense, trying to, and Venkat, stop me or correct me if I'm going wrong anywhere. But in many senses, we were trying to form an affective vocabulary baseline on certain objects. And you're absolutely correct that this is a moving target. So depending on populations, but one of the pilot projects that we did, we tried to look at 10 visual objects taken from open source archives across the world, and trying to have this workshop with neurodivergent individuals and people who don't often access art, and see what kind of an affective baseline is being created. So that was just an example, but as you rightly pointed out, this will keep changing being target.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Yeah, Cleona, I mean, just to add to that, I would just say that as an archivist, I've just generally been interested in seeing, are these going to allow for different ways of discovering or finding material? The fact that the AI tools are using it is not the only reason to start doing it. But even independent of that, I think it was just a useful frame for us to try and ask this question, and to try and map it to the subject headings was just to make sure that we're still trying to work within existing frameworks. In some future, so you could go on Annomilli and look for things that evoke surprise in people's minds. So if you type in the word surprise in the Annomilli interface, you will find that maybe not in the subject headings, but you will find it in emotional annotation terms, for instance. So it changes the way you look for things.
Absolutely. I missed the first few minutes, but I wonder, have you looked at Mukurtu? And I don't think, I mean, it has a lot of different, it makes a lot more space for indigenous knowledge, but I'm not sure that affect is specifically handled there.
I don't know how well Mukurtu does it deal with affect. If anybody else in the audience knows about this, that'll be great. I'm not familiar with if it specifically deals with affect. I do know that it allows for various registers of description. It allows for faceted ways in which people can describe or make material visible to some people and not, and allow for annotations, of course. But the question that we've been trying to figure out constantly is, what do we do in ways that can just feed back to the catalog? That's so the problem is really one for us of making sure that it feeds back to the knowledge spaces. But I will check on Mukurtu as well, now that you mentioned. Thank you. We have maybe a few minutes left. Ojas, it just occurred to me that I was just looking at the admin platform. There's a couple, I think there's at least one person who's added annotations. So I don't know if you want to share screen or something. I could do that as well.
Oh, okay. That's great.
But in the meantime, if anybody else has any questions, feel free to ask. But if not, you can. I see at least one user annotation has come up, so it'll be nice to see if this works out. Denny or Tarunema or Manas, if you're in the audience, is there anything else that you'd like to add that we've overlooked?
No, I think we've overlooked anything.
Just for those of you who don't know, they are the names also on the. Okay, so Denny, Manas, Tarunema, and Atman, who's also, I think, joined the call, are the people behind the work that you see on the screen besides Ojas. Ojas, should I share my screen? Or
Yeah, can you?
Okay, I'll do that. Yeah.
Screen is a bit stuck. Sorry.
So if you can see my screen, so there's one set of user annotations so as an admin, I would typically want to just take a look at the object. So if you hover over this, you'll see which object they are annotating. So I would take a look at that just to see what they're looking at. Looks like a bunch of illustrations of birds. So I get a sense of what it is. And they're adding specific names of birds that they have pulled from, I know LCSH's Library of Congress subject headings. So at this point, I have to confess that I'm not a bird expert. So I'm going to have to go with what they have said and assume that I think it's a set of 15 sketches. So just for the sake of this experiment, I'm going to go ahead and approve them. And so the next time you look for kingfishers, which may otherwise not have existed. So if I just look on the public interface of Annomilli, I'll at least find kingfishers in 4 different results, including illustration of birds in this Jamalara collection, but I do see it in 3 other collections. So good, all right. And then if, to respond to Martha's first question, if a source archive wants to import this, they can always do that by going to this. If they have admin privileges, and any of you who are interested, you can just reach out to us. You can always export the files and then import it back to your source archive. So that's how it will look. Okay. All right. Okay. That's about it. Thanks so much to everyone for being here. We are at the hour, so we will perhaps stop our recording here. We would love to hear from any of you if you'd like to collaborate or take this forward. And that's about it. I'm just going to stop the recording and I'll continue to respond to questions.